The evening began like any other, calm and ordinary, the kind of day when nothing unusual is expected to happen. I was sitting alone in my room when I heard a knock at the gate. Opening it, I saw both of my neighbors standing there, their faces warm and inviting. They spoke with a tone of friendliness, insisting that I come over to their house for tea. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't used to such gestures from them, but their insistence carried a certain charm. Finally, I agreed, thinking it would be nothing more than polite conversation and perhaps a pleasant evening. Their home had a quiet warmth about it, filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea. We sat together at the table, the three of us, and began with casual talk about the neighborhood, about work, about life's usual complaints and joys. I found myself relaxing in their company. The laughter came easily, as though the walls between us had been lowered that night. Yet, in the middle of our cheerful chatter, I began to sense something beneath the surface. Their glances lingered a little too long, their smiles carried an unspoken weight, and their words seemed to weave around me in ways I couldn't ignore. The more time passed, the more the air seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. One neighbor leaned closer when speaking to me, the other observed silently with eyes that told their own story. At moments, I felt caught in a silent tug-of-war I hadn't agreed to play, but curiosity stopped me from leaving. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just my imagination turning ordinary gestures into something else. But inside, I knew something was unfolding, something that would change the course of the night. As the hours slipped by, laughter faded into quieter tones. We spoke of dreams, of loneliness, of secret thoughts people rarely share. One neighbor's words carried an unusual tenderness, as though they weren't speaking to me as a neighbor, but as someone they had longed to know more closely. Their gaze lingered on mine, and in that stillness, the room felt smaller, as though the world outside no longer existed. I felt a shiver run through me, not from fear, but from the strange intimacy that had silently crept into our gathering. When I excused myself to stand near the window, just to break the tension, one of them followed, speaking softly, so the other could not hear. Their voice trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from the weight of honesty they were trying to carry. "I need tell you something," they whispered, eyes searching mine for permission to continue. My heart pounded, unsure of what would come next. Their words fell like stones in still water, breaking the calm. "I've always admired you, more than I should." The confession hung in the air, too heavy to ignore, too intimate to dismiss. I froze, caught between shock and the pull of emotions I didn't want to name. Behind us, the other neighbor was still seated at the table, unaware, or perhaps pretending not to notice. The moment carved a line in the evening, dividing it from everything that had come before. I stood there, struggling to respond, my mind torn between reason and the dangerous curiosity of where this secret might lead. That night no longer belonged to ordinary life. A story had begun to write itself, one that would draw me into a web of choices and consequences I couldn't yet see. All I knew was that the first step had already been taken, and there was no turning back. The night after that confession, I found myself restless, turning over the memory in my mind. The way those words had been spoken, quietly but with such certainty, left me both unsettled and strangely drawn in. I told myself to forget it, to treat it as nothing more than a fleeting slip of honesty, yet my heart refused to let go. Days passed with polite greetings and casual exchanges, but beneath the surface, something had shifted. The neighbor who had spoken those words seemed different around me now, their gestures carrying a quiet intensity, their eyes searching mine as though silently asking if I remembered. I tried to act normal, but one evening, when I was returning home, I saw them waiting outside. They smiled faintly, as if they had been rehearsing this moment. "Can we talk?" they asked softly, almost pleading. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked a little, away from the houses, away from the lights. Their voice was low, hesitant at first, but soon the words flowed like a river that had been dammed too long. They spoke of loneliness, of feeling unseen, of how every time they looked at me, they felt something they couldn't ignore. I listened, torn between sympathy and the danger of what was unfolding. What began as a conversation soon turned into a closeness that neither of us had planned. There was no need for dramatic declarations. It was in the way they looked at me, in the pauses between words, in the silence that felt heavier than any confession. I knew I should have stepped back, but instead I found myself leaning into that forbidden comfort. Each meeting grew more daring, each exchange more weighted with feelings we both knew should have been left unsaid. Yet while this hidden connection deepened, I could not ignore the presence of the other neighbor. They remained kind, welcoming, but there was something about their gaze that unsettled me. It was as if they sensed something had changed, as if they could read the secrets hiding in the spaces between my words. More than once I caught them looking at me with an expression that was hard to define. Not quite anger, not quite suspicion, but something in between. One evening, after sharing quiet moments with the first neighbor, I left their company feeling both exhilarated and guilty. As I stepped outside, the other neighbor was there, standing by the doorway, watching me. Their eyes met mine, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Finally, they broke the silence. "I've seen the way you look at them," they said, their voice steady, but laced with something deeper. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to deny it, but they continued. "You don't have to pretend. I feel it too, and not just for them, for you." The words struck like a second blow, unexpected and disarming. I stood frozen, unable to find an answer, as though the ground beneath me had given way. One confession had been hard enough, but now there were two, each pulling me in a different direction. In that moment, I realized I was caught in the middle of something far more complicated than I could handle. The days that followed became a maze of emotions. With one neighbor, there was the comfort of whispered talks and stolen time. With the other, there was an intensity that unsettled me, a burning honesty that demanded acknowledgement. Each encounter left me more entangled, more aware of how dangerously thin the line was between loyalty and betrayal, between desire and destruction. And yet, even knowing the risks, I couldn't walk away. Something in me was drawn to the drama, to the thrill of being wanted, to the strange power of carrying a secret that could not be spoken aloud. I told myself I could manage it, that I could keep the balance between them without tipping too far. But deep down I knew the truth. Secrets like these never stay hidden forever. And the night would soon come when both paths would collide, forcing me to face the choice I had been avoiding since the first whispered confession. The tension between us grew heavier with each passing day. What had started as a whisper of temptation was now a storm threatening to break. I found myself drawn deeper into their world, spending moments with one neighbor while carrying the weight of the other's gaze in the back of my mind. Every visit to their house felt like stepping into a stage where every gesture, every glance, was being carefully observed. The walls seemed to listen. The silence seemed to accuse. With the first neighbor, there was gentleness, a tenderness that made me feel understood. They spoke with patience, offering comfort in the form of quiet words and soft laughter. Being with them was like stepping into a safe harbor, a place where the outside world faded away. Yet it was not peace that bound me to them, but the danger of what we were hiding. The secret of it, the thrill of being wanted when we should not have been, made every moment sharper, brighter, impossible to ignore. But the second neighbor was nothing like that. With them, there was fire. Their words carried a weight that was impossible to resist, a directness that left me breathless. They did not wait or hesitate. Instead, they confronted me with truths I was afraid to admit. When they looked at me, it was as though they could see straight through my defenses, stripping away every excuse I tried to build. Being near them felt dangerous, like standing too close to a flame, but I could not pull away. Caught between these two forces, my life became a series of careful lies. I found myself calculating the hours, choosing my words, guarding every move so that one would not discover what I shared with the other. But no matter how hard I tried to keep them apart, their worlds began to overlap. Small details betrayed me. The way I laughed too easily at one's jokes, the way I lingered too long in the other's presence. I could feel their suspicions growing, though neither spoke of it directly. The weight of their unspoken rivalry pressed down on me. At gatherings, their conversations carried hidden sharpness. Smiles that once seemed warm now held an edge, as though every word was a test, every silence a challenge. They spoke to each other with politeness, but underneath, there was a current of jealousy, of something breaking. I watched them both carefully, trying to pretend nothing was wrong, but the truth was clear. They were beginning to sense that they were not alone in their feelings for me. One evening, I found myself caught in the middle of their quiet battle. We sat together, the three of us, the air heavy with words unsaid. They spoke to me, not to each other, each trying to claim my attention, each glance a silent question of where my heart truly belonged. I laughed nervously, tried to change the subject, but my efforts only deepened the tension. I could feel their eyes on me, pulling me in two directions at once, and for the first time I realized there was no way to escape without hurting someone. The guilt began to eat away at me. At night, I lay awake, turning over every moment in my mind. Was it fair to either of them? Was it fair to myself? I told myself I could stop, that I could walk away, but when morning came and I saw them again, all my resolve melted. It wasn't just desire that bound me to them. It was the strange sense of being wanted, of being chosen, of holding a power I had never known before. That temptation was stronger than any logic, stronger than any warning my conscience could give. And then came the first real crack in the facade. Late one night, as I left the house of the first neighbor, I caught sight of the second standing in the shadows, watching. Their expression was unreadable, but their silence said everything. In that single moment, I knew the balance I had been struggling to maintain was about to collapse. The triangle of secrets had reached its breaking point, and soon, the truth would no longer remain hidden. The night of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. What I had feared most, what I had tried so carefully to prevent, finally came to pass. It began with a knock on my door. When I opened it, both of them were standing there, side by side, their faces stiff with unspoken tension. My heart sank. They had not come for casual conversation, not for tea or laughter. They had come for answers. We sat together in the same room where our story had first begun. The air was heavy, every sound amplified. The ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the night outside, the quickened rhythm of my own breathing. For a long while no one spoke. Then the first neighbor broke the silence, their voice low and trembling. "I thought what we shared was ours alone," they said, their eyes locked on mine, filled with hurt. But it seems I was wrong. Before I could respond, the second neighbor leaned forward, their tone sharper, more direct. "Don't play games anymore," they said. "I've seen enough. I know what's been happening. What I want to know is why you thought you could keep us both in the dark." The words cut like a blade. I felt exposed, cornered, stripped of every excuse. My throat tightened as I searched for words, but none came easily. I wanted to explain, to soften the truth, but what could I possibly say that would not sound like betrayal? The silence between them stretched, growing heavier by the second, until it was clear there was no way out but confession. "I never meant to hurt either of you," I whispered finally, my voice barely audible. "I was caught in something I didn't know how to stop. I cared for both of you in different ways, and I let myself be pulled too far." The first neighbor turned away, their hands trembling, their breath uneven. The second clenched their jaw, anger flickering in their eyes, but beneath the anger was something else. Pain, raw and undeniable. The room felt smaller with every passing second, as though the walls themselves were closing in on us. What followed was not shouting, not the dramatic storm I had feared, but something quieter, heavier. Words spoken through broken voices, confessions of jealousy and longing, questions that had no answers. They turned on each other too, each accusing the other of betrayal, though I was the one who had woven the threads between them. I sat in silence, watching the destruction I had caused unfold before me. It became clear then that nothing would ever be the same. Trust had been shattered, not only between them and me, but between the two of them as well. What had once been a bond of closeness now stood cracked, fragile, poisoned by secrets. I wished desperately to take it back, to return to the night of laughter and tea when everything had seemed innocent. But once words are spoken, once lines are crossed, there is no return. When the night ended, it ended not with forgiveness but with distance. The first neighbor left the room without looking back, their shoulders shaking as they disappeared into the darkness. The second lingered a moment longer, their eyes meeting mine with a mixture of sorrow and finality. "You should have chosen," they said quietly before walking away. I was left alone in the silence of that house, the echoes of their footsteps fading, the emptiness pressing in around me. My chest felt heavy, not only with guilt but with the realization of what I had lost. The thrill, the danger, the secret that had once seemed intoxicating had turned into ashes, leaving nothing but regret.